He's delivering his closing message to this state and really to many voters who still have yet to cast their ballot, saying, quote, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" And when you talk to Republicans and operatives in his party, they say that that is the message that they wish this campaign had focused on more in the closing weeks of this race. Instead, there have been so many other controversies and issues that have distracted from that message being the focal point of this campaign. You remember we spent days talking about a comedian suggesting that Puerto Rico was an island of garbage. There was his suggestion that he would put RFK Jr. in charge of women's health and health care in this country. There was this spat with Liz Cheney. All of these elements have distracted from Donald Trump focusing in this final week about the economy. And one of the reasons why he has had such difficulty focusing on the economy as a top issue is because he doesn't really believe it is the #1 issue in this election. He believes it is immigration and the U.S. southern border. He says that quite often when he is at these rallies. He tells it to the media. He says it in his appearances. It's the #1 issue to him is immigration, and that is largely because that is the issue that he won on in 2016.
We are 3 days out. I just want to get your 30,000-foot view of where you think we are right now.
Close. We're very, very close. I mean, this is a race in which the battleground states are all separated by all within the margin of error, many within a point. Fractions of a point, and everyone is scrapping for an advantage. And what's interesting to me is all of this attention on North Carolina, because earlier in the week the Harris campaign had actually cut its television buy in North Carolina, and late in the week it came back and restored the buy, and now she's going there, and now Trump's going there 4 times, and it makes you feel like both campaigns feel like the state is in play.
Yeah.
But you know, I also think that if you are Kamala Harris, you know, you want an insurance policy in case there's some chip in that blue wall you're counting on. North Carolina, 16 electoral votes. Georgia, where she was today, 16 electoral votes. That is an insurance policy. I expect that she'll spend most of the next 48 hours concentrating on those 3 blue wall states, but it just gives you a sense of how close this race is.
It is really incredible.
One thing, Jessica, can I just say
yeah.
one other thing? I was so interested in the 2 reports from Steve and Priscilla, because Steve said a lot of Republicans are frustrated because Trump keeps getting off message, and they'd like him to be on the same message that his campaign is communicating on television in its advertising that has a lot to do with the economy. Priscilla showed the vice president talking about how unhinged and vengeful and so on Trump is. And, you know, you've got this, he is actually abetting her message in the final week. And that's got to make Republicans uncomfortable. I'm sure they would love him to stay tethered to that prompter a little bit more and deliver the message that they think will help him win this election. But he's not closing well. She's closing in a much more disciplined way. I said earlier today that, you know, she's been criticized for being too cautious, but being disciplined in these final 72 hours is really an advantage if you're on your message. Being undisciplined can be very damaging, and so we'll see how that all works out.
So that dovetails really nicely into the other thing I wanted to ask you about on this specific thing, which is the Harris campaign said this week they believe that these voters that are making up their minds as we speak, late-breaking voters are breaking their way, that they feel pretty confident in what the trends that they are seeing. What do you think about that, and do you think that's true?
Well, I mean, all I can do is look at the data that I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
And I think there may be something to that. It would dovetail with what I perceive to be the case, which is that she has been for the last 10 days or more, she's been on a pretty consistent message, and you heard it summarized at that speech at the at the mall the other day on Tuesday, and she's been repeating it around the country. I'm focused on your problems. He's focused on his problems. And I think that rings true with a lot of voters. There is something, Jessica, holding voters back from committing to Donald Trump. If you just looked at the right track number in the country, 28%, the president's approval rating flirting with 40, and some of the economic numbers, you would not the numbers of the economy, but the numbers that people feel
how they feel
measure
about
their
it.
feel about the economy. You'd say the incumbent party would lose that election, and yet they're in the position to potentially win this election. And a lot of it has to do with these deep reservations about Donald Trump, about his motivations, about his self-control, about whether he can be relied on to really fight for middle-class families, or whether he's just going to be focused on himself and Elon Musk and others. And they have really seized that message in the last 10 days, and they're driving it. And it wouldn't be surprised to me if these cross-pressured voters, the ones that are left, are considering this very deeply right now, and some of them may be flipping her way.
I want to ask you about this Harris ad that has gotten a lot of attention about women who are going to vote and maybe not tell their partners, their spouses. It's narrated by Julia Roberts. I want to play a quick clip of it. Let's watch it.
Yeah, sure.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth.
And David, some on the right have been pretty outraged by this. They've compared it to an affair. Trump told Fox News it's a sign of a bad relationship. What do you think about this particular ad, that messaging? We're kind of seeing this. I've seen things online with women posting notes in women's bathrooms. Yeah. What do you think about all of this?
Well, look, you may be more qualified than I to judge that ad. I don't know how everyone is going to receive that ad, but I will tell you this. I think one of the great mysteries that is going to be unlocked, one of the theories that is going to be tested when we start looking at these votes is, are there Republican women crossing over? We know that Republican women in the suburbs, for example, have been voting heavily in places like the suburbs of Atlanta. Are they coming out to vote for Donald Trump, or is some portion of them coming out to vote for Kamala Harris? We know that there are non-college white women who could be a pool of support for Kamala Harris. And, I don't know whether they feel uncomfortable talking with people about their vote or not. But clearly we're not seeing that showing up in the numbers particularly. But if, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for. The other would be, is there going to be a surge of Trump voters that have been not captured by the pollsters for a third straight election? There are a lot of theories about the fact that pollsters are now overcorrecting, and they're actually accounted for in these polls. We don't know the answer to that either. I mean, we're in the position of having to watch this election in the old-fashioned way and wait for the votes to be counted.
Do you think that's why so many the Democrats have certainly been very anxious about this, very nervous, and there's been a lot of anxiety, throughout the country on both sides. This is a high-stakes election that means a lot to Americans, and it just brings so much emotion to all of this.
Yeah, look, I think that there's no doubt that many, many Americans are feeling the stakes. Donald Trump obviously has stakes that surpass anyone else's who's ever run for president, because, in a sense, his own future outside of politics is going to be determined by this election. If he has to stand trial and loses this election, he's made it clear he won't stand trial if he does, because he is going to fire the special counsel who brought the indictment. But so there's a lot surging around this election, concerns about democracy, and let's be clear, to a lot of Americans, it's a fundamental question. Americans who don't have the luxury to be consumed by the impact on democracy because they're worried about how to pay the bills. And they're asking, who's going to actually fight for me? Who might help me a little bit? Now, do they say, I felt better under Trump, that I did better under Trump? Or are they going to say, he's off on his own thing here, and we don't need that kind of chaos, and we don't need that kind of vengefulness? I'd rather take a chance on someone who has some good ideas that might help me. That's what the Harris campaign is counting on. But yeah, this is a high-stakes affair, and I don't know how many times I walk on the street, and I don't know how many times I get stopped every day, and people say, well, you know, just between us, who's going to win? It's like, it beats the hell out of me. I just don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody does.